up until 1967, this was a Syrian territory. This is not Israel. All right. Actually, before we start coming up on the Golan Heights, where I showed you the sign that says Golan, that was the borderline. Of course, everybody knows that in the Six-Day War, Israel took over the Golan Heights and the West Bank and the Gaza Strip and all of that. And that created, a lot of tension at the time. In 1973, Syria, initiated an attack on Israel. That was during the Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. And Israel was not prepared for this. Where we're going to go this afternoon and visit the primacy of Peter. That's really way down by the Sea of Galilee. It was to the point where the Syrian soldiers reached that much into Israel, actually, and they were having breakfast there in the church garden. At the time, you had the Secretary of State by the name of Henry Kissinger, if you still remember the name.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. He's the one who stopped, and he promised that there will be negotiations and all of that. And since then, there is a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Syria. And I have to tell you that this ceasefire agreement has been in full respect. Nobody violated that. And actually, it was well kept, because on both sides of the ceasefire line, there were permanent, stable governments. Israel on this side, and Syria on the other side. Again, some of you probably are young to remember, but there was the father, the President Assad, the father, not this one, who respected the ceasefire agreement. There was always back and forth negotiations, UN, resolutions and all of that. But it was always within, a frame under the, UN Security Council and all of that. What happened like 5-6 years ago, somebody decided that there's going to be a new movement in the Middle East to remove dictatorship and start a new way of life in the Middle East, which that term comes to the minds of people. The media used something called the Arab Spring. Everybody thought this is the case. This is not the case, folks. There is no Arab Spring. And I will say, I don't really have all the time to go through the details, but I will tell you this much. The West should leave the Middle East alone. The Middle East cannot live the democracy that the West wants them to live. You know why mainly? Because the Middle East is controlled by a religion, which is Islam, that doesn't really agree with anything called democracy. You can teach the Muslims anything you want, but when it comes to religion, religion rules. There's no argument about that. Democracy is not a new phone that you buy and you plug into the wall and it starts working. Democracy is a process. Islam is ruled by God, not by the civil laws, from which they always aspire to reach what? Whatever they are, the Sharia laws. The laws of God, not the laws of the people. Not the civil laws. That doesn't apply to them. And what happened in the Middle East in the process of removing the so-called dictators, who rises?
Yeah.
If we had one chief controlling Iraq and you bring him down, now you have 500 chiefs. The next thing that you know is that the Arabs are tribal. You know, in Arabic we say, me and my brother against my cousin, but me and my cousin against the stranger. It doesn't matter if my cousin is wrong, I have to support my cousin. Unlike in the West, all right? So what happened is a community that is a tribal community, a community that is, or people who are tribal, I'm not saying a small community, but the whole Muslim Arab world is like that. And then they are not only tribal, but they are also ruled and controlled by Islam. And you come and you want to make it a democracy. That's not going to work. That doesn't work. When you bring down Saddam Hussein in Iraq, and you bring down Gaddafi in Libya, and you bring down Mubarak in Egypt, and you bring down, let's say, Assad in Syria, and you bring down King Abdullah in Jordan, okay, are we prepared now for democracy? What's going to happen? Chaos. And those fanatic groups that immediately creeped in to that vacant lack of authority and chaos are the people who are interested in taking this Arab world back into the Sharia laws. Under Sharia laws, minorities cannot survive. And I'm referring to who? I'm referring to the Christians that live in those countries. I have some numbers that would scare you. Iraq had over 2 million Christians. Maybe today we have 100,000 left in there. Syria had over 1 million Christians. Maybe 100,000 are left there. Libya had Christians. You know who's from Libya, by the way, in the Bible? Simon of Cyrene, he's a Libyan. Cyrene is Libya. Iran has Christians. You know where's the best community of Christians that are still living in I would say, good life? Jordan. Because the king protects them. God forbid the king falls tomorrow, no more Christians. So what the West tried to do is to make that switch in the Arab Muslim world. It turned to be a big failure. It turned to be actually a negative effect on the small communities. We Christians cannot survive under chaos. Minorities need law to protect them. There is no law over there. I am not here to defend those dictators, but I'm going to tell you this much. We were better off with dictators than lack of rule and lack of law in these countries. There is no violation of ceasefire agreement between Israel and Syria, but do I want to leave Syria in the hands of ISIS on the borders with Israel? No, I don't want them to be in control of the weapons and unconventional weapons and all of that we claim Syria has. I don't trust them. I don't trust them in Iraq. I don't trust them in Libya. I don't trust them in Jordan. All their goal is to bring the Sharia laws back to rule. Their goal is to outnumber Christians, and outnumber Christians not only here, outnumber Christians everywhere else. I mean, how about England? How about Germany? They're coming into your backyard if you don't know. And I could show you, a lot of things that I get all the time, little videos in the States of a spokesman here and there and what they're talking, and they speak of their intentions about not just mixing in the American society, but also try to change the American society into something that conforms with the rules of, and the Sharia laws of Islam and all of this and all of that. I'm not talking to say, I have something against them, but I always say, if you want to live by these laws, you live those laws. Don't impose on others. I think the West should have actually kept an eye on the Middle East, because with what happened in the last 5-10 years is that we have lost the Christian presence in the Middle East. I call this ethnic cleansing of the Christians out of the Middle East, what happened here, folks. I'll tell you this much. I have relatives on that side. I have relatives in Lebanon. I have relatives in Jordan. We're a big tribe, right? I haven't seen those all my life. I'll even tell you a more specific story. You know that in the midst of those trees right there, you see those scattered trees? There's a whole village called Quneitra. It was a Christian village. In 1967, as you can see, it's on the borders. It was a very tough battle here. And that village was completely demolished, destroyed. I was then 6 years old. And my father, who is a pipeline welder, my father worked under a company that laid all the oil pipelines in the Middle East back in the 40s and 30s, late 30s, beginning of the 40s. It was an Iraqi petroleum company, or it's a British, but it was called the Iraqi Petroleum Company, the IPC. And at the age of 14, he was working already in Iraq and Syria and all those places, Jordan. And after, 48, of course, Israel set the boundaries and nobody could cross borders. My father becomes an Israeli citizen, and in 1967, when after the 6-Day War, there was a lot of damage in this area. There was a water pipe in this village that was bombed, and they wanted my father to go out there and fix it, fix that, weld it, whatever. And I remember it was a Monday, and I was off school, and he took me with him, and I came here in 1967, just a few days after the war. Have you seen war movies where they show you, villages where smoke is still coming out? And I've seen that, but not in the movie. I've seen it in reality here. I was 6 years old. We walked in that village, and there is a mosque. I can point to it. Can you see the minaret of the mosque right there? You can't probably spot that, but there is a church also next to it, because wherever we build a church, they build a mosque next door. And he was working on that water pipe to fix, and then about 10:30 in the morning, he took a break, and we went in one of the homes, and we were gonna sit there and bite a sandwich and have some coffee. And I noticed where we came in, there was a little fireplace, and on the fireplace was sitting a coffee pot this big, brass coffee pot, very nice, and it just caught my eyes at the age of 6. So my father was having breakfast, and I looked at him and I said, "Dad, can I take this?" And he said, blank no. I said, "Why?" The Israelis are taking everything out of these homes, and they were shipping that all the way to Tel Aviv to a flea market at the time. He said, "They can do that, we cannot do that." And then he pointed to the wall. There was a big cross hanging on the wall. He said, these might be our relatives. So I waited until he finished, went back to work. I picked up the coffee pot and put that in the car. We only had the one car, so when we got home, we're going to use that for whatever else we're going to use it. And he found the coffee pot in the car. I was already in the house and I heard my name being hollered from outside. The rest is for your imagination.
How long before you sat down?
Now I got married, and shortly after I got married, he comes to my house. And I opened the door for him and he's holding the coffee pot and he said, here. I said, what? He said, this is for you to keep watch over until you can take it back. And then he turned it around. He said, you see the name of the family? It's carved on the coffee pot. You took it, you take it back. How many years have passed since 67? How many? I don't know. 52. More than 40. I'm still waiting to do that. Do you think I'll ever get to do it? I have it in my house. I take it out every Easter season. I clean it with lemon juice and all of that and put it back on the shelf, waiting to go back. The story is not about me. The story is not about the coffee pot. The story is about when will the Christians reconnect again as families. That's not going to happen, obviously. I don't know if there's any more Christians here. The city was completely destroyed. If you look in the distance, there is another city that was built. That's the new Conetra that was built. Can you see the city beyond? I told you that this water reservoir is a Syrian reservoir. The village on the right of that reservoir is a Syrian village. Look how close we are. You know how close? If we cross the border, where are the borders? Can you see that dirt road that comes down from the hill over there? Beyond the UN? Okay? If you go with that road, it comes comes all the way behind the military, the UN military. You see that white bark standing by itself right there? Mm-hmm. Look to the right, you see two yellow things? Mm-hmm. That's the gate to cross into Syria right there. All right? Now if you go from that white box a little bit to the left, look in the distance, you see the road snaking up on the hill. Can you see that? Mm-hmm. What's next to it that you see like a snake, a gray color, that is actually the fence, the border. All right? So from there, I mean, let me go back to the two yellow things right there. If you cross through that, you drive 20 minutes that direction, beyond that hill. You come to the highway, the famous highway, Beirut, Damascus, which connects Beirut with Damascus. Okay? If you go on that highway and you reach that point, turn right and you go another 25 minutes and you are right in the heart of Damascus. Why is that important up here? Because from up there, you can see the airport in Damascus from up there. Right? In the old days, not too old, at the time of my father, he would say you can have breakfast in Beirut, lunch in Damascus, and dinner in Jerusalem. That's how close we are. I am sorry to say that not many of the Christians are left in Syria. When Dr. John was talking about Aramaic, you need to know that there is 2 villages in Syria where the daily after they cleared Aleppo from ISIS, he participated in the midnight mass in Aleppo at the cathedral. Because the Christians are loyal to the regimes where they are. You'll be surprised to know that those Muslim presidents, call them the way you want to call them, when it comes to the secret services and all the secrets of the regime that they are in charge of, the ones who they trust are only the Christians. That is true in Jordan. The secret services for the king are all Christians. They don't trust their own, they trust the Christians. Unfortunately, we are losing all of these people. We are, people say we're a minority. Let's just remember that we were here before Islam. Not the opposite. That's a wrong approach. Islam comes after Christianity, not before Christianity. And we, from the very beginning, we were squeezed out of Saudi Arabia, where Islam began. But the tribes of Christians were moved from Saudi Arabia to Jordan, to Syria, to Lebanon, and some of us moved into Palestine of today or Israel of today. That's why we are Christians. Those of you who study the movement of the Christians, you learn that there are two groups. One group that accepted Christianity in the first century right after Pentecost. All right, if you read Acts chapter 2, it will tell you that the disciples went out and they started speaking in different tongues, and then it starts to name all the nations and all the different languages, and it would say the Arabs were there. That's one group that accepted Christianity. And the other group was the group that accepted Christianity through the missionaries that came to this part of the world back in the 4th century. Do you think the Prophet Muhammad wrote the Quran? A monk, a Christian monk, is the one who was the writer of the Quran. Okay? They came with science and with languages, and they were preaching. Tribes in Saudi Arabia converted to Christianity, and when Islam came, they were persecuted, and that's the movement they made. Saudi Arabia to Jordan, to Syria, to Lebanon, and to the north of Israel today. So scholars who studied that now agree that there is no Christians between Galilee until you get to Jerusalem, because those are the two different groups. One that was generated or was born at the time of Pentecost in Judea. There was nothing in Samaria until you get to Galilee, and the Galilean Christians are actually after that big move they made from Saudi Arabia. All of us date back to that time. Now the Christians have been in the land, in Galilee at least, our family, according to what we know, were 800 years in Galilee. And most of the Christians are connected because they are all one big tribe originally, and they broke into families. But we are all related somehow. That's why we left some on the way in Syria, and some on the way in Lebanon, and some on the way in Jordan, but we're all one big family. In Jordan, because of the peace agreement we have with Jordan, we can go see them, but we can't see them here. And in Lebanon,